Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Yes, lots going on here, particularly in my corner of the world, and we are hoping for peace and quiet, and our tefillot are with our soldiers, with the wounded, with the hostages, and that everything should go well, and we should see them released, and we should see success in everything that we are doing. Okay, we are going to start. As I may have mentioned to you guys before, this class is a new class. It's a little bit experimental. Um, and so I'm experimenting a little this time. And what I'm doing here this time, instead of doing two objects, we'll see how it goes. I might end up with a little bit of a second object, but mostly we're going to be focusing on one today because it really had so much that could be talked about. Okay, and that's why I'm not exactly going according to the schedule that's posted on the website. I hope everyone can cope with that. I'm sure you can. Okay, so today, we are really going to be in the Byzantine period, and we're going to be with one object that's created in the Byzantine period, and that gives us a real window into a lot of different things that are important in this time period. What's the main thing we want to understand about Byzantine as opposed to Roman, right? Last time we were talking about Romans. This is kind of an artificial construct, right? The Byzantine Empire is the Roman Empire. Byzantium is the old name of Constantinople, is the eastern part of the empire, but they thought of themselves as Romans. In Israeli history, right, in history of the land of Israel, we talk about Byzantines, we mean the Christian Roman Empire. That's really the implication. And we could get into a whole historical conversation. We're not going to do that. Okay. We are talking about the Christianized Roman Empire and what that means for the Christian world, but for us, what that means for the Jewish world. And things change, right? There are places that Jews are not allowed to go to, are not allowed to live in anymore. There are places that Christians want to visit, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, pilgrimage and travel. There are much more harsh, religiously oriented attitudes and laws against the Jews. And there's a sharing of the Bible, right? Something we didn't really see in the pagan world. Christians also ascribe importance to the Bible and have knowledge of the Bible, and that's going to be part of our story as well. This great picture is not an original Byzantine mosaic. We are going to see a bunch of them. This comes from new mosaics that were made a couple of years ago, like 5 years ago, to decorate the Cardo in Jerusalem. If you've been to the Cardo recently, so there's the archaeology, but there's also a painting that you'll see a little bit later, a mural of what things might have looked like then. And a couple of years ago, the Jewish Quarter Development Company decided to do this great project where they took mosaic artists from Kibbutz Elon in the north, and they had them create stores, right? Because the Cardo, of course, was a commercial street. What would the stores have looked like? And they used mosaics, because as we're going to see, mosaic art is the art of the Byzantine Empire. And they base the pictures on archaeological findings. And some of them are just spectacular, and some of them, and they're fun to look at because some of them are very not like our world, right? There's an animal store, there's a musical instrument store. The spices, if you've ever gone shopping, either in the Arab Shuk in the Old City or in the Machane Yehuda, spice stores don't look so different from this. The outfits are different, but the mounds of the spices and the colors pretty similar. So I just thought that was a fun way for us to start. Okay, as always, let's take a quick look at our timeline. Um, and understand what's the time period that we're talking about. Okay, so just to focus us, and obviously I put in very specific time period, like time things. We don't have everything here, but important for us. Okay, first of all, from the Jewish side, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jews are forbidden to come to Jerusalem. That lasts essentially till the Muslim period, even though we have records of maybe like, a couple of years here and there that Jews were unofficially allowed in. But basically, Jews are kicked out of Jerusalem for 500 years. We saw that last time. That's very important. In the Jewish world, we finished the Mishnah. We have the last generation of Tanaim in 200. Then we have the Amoraim, and eventually the completion of both the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. That's happening during Byzantine times. Moving into Christianity, right? If Christianity for its first almost 300 years is persecuted religion, and the Roman Empire does not like the Christians, and we have a lot of Christian martyrs from those first centuries. By the early fourth century, right, 313, the Edict of Milan says Christianity must be a tolerated religion. Even more important, towards the end of his life, the Emperor Constantine, incredibly powerful emperor, right, who instigates all this new tolerance and is much more sympathetic to Christianity and to Christians, he eventually converts to Christianity, and he converts the whole empire with him, which of course changes not just our time period, but world history in general. Also, his mother, Helena, visits the Holy Land. So we're going to come back to that. Eusebius, we'll talk about him. He's around the same time. 100 years later, we have another empress, Byzantine empress, Eudokia, who comes to Jerusalem, rebuilds the city wall. 542, the Nea Church. We'll see why that's important later. And our object, surprise, right? So I feel like it's like a game show. The Medva map, okay, which is created at some point between 542 and 570. How do we know that? We'll see as we talk about it. Then we go forward quite a long time, centuries until the late 19th century. The Medva map is unknown, and then it's rediscovered. And 100 years after that, Professor Nachman Avigad and his team excavate in the Jewish quarter, and they uncover things that we see from the map. So all those things, very important, very significant for us. Okay, so keep those dates and times in mind. And here's our object, the Medva map. We are going to look at more pieces of it. The part that I think all of us are familiar with is Jerusalem over here. We're going to see it up close. Don't worry. But a lot of us are not, and that's because we've seen copies of it. We've seen enlargements of it. We use it a lot when we talk about Jerusalem in this time period. But be aware that there's much, much more to this map, okay? And we're going to take apart some of the pieces, but just to kind of understand what's going on here, right? We have the Jordan River here. We have the Dead Sea, okay? We have a whole area of Jordan. Okay, we're going to talk about the direction of this map and its orientation very soon. Don't worry. Okay, we have the Negev and the desert going all the way down to the Nile and Egypt, right? People imagine that the Nile was really directly south of Eretz Israel. Okay? We have a lot of the land of Judah, right? Over here. We have Ashkelon. We have other places near the coast. Okay. What do we not have? And we'll talk about why we don't have it. We don't have this nice large chunk of the Negev going all the way to the coast, and we don't have most of the north, okay? But we really have on this map quite a large part of the center of the land of Israel. And as well as some of Jordan, some of Egypt. Okay? And what we're going to see is, what does this map really teach us about the world of the people who made it? Okay. The other thing I want to point out, and we'll go into this more deeply, but you can see that there are inscriptions all over here in Greek. Okay. Some of them are rather large. Okay, a lot of them are the names of the tribes. Okay, Nachalat Shimon, Nachalat Dan, Nachalat Yehuda. Okay, or I mean, it's not in Hebrew, obviously, it's in Greek. Okay, you have much smaller ones that are telling you the names of places or giving you a description. So we've got lots of things going on here, and we're going to try to unpack at least some of them. Okay, and we're going to look at some of them up close and personal. All right, finish erasing here, and we will go on. If I have any Greek readers, which in this crowd I probably do have some, you'll be able to tell us what everything says. Okay. Yes, Constantine was a pagan before his conversion, definitely. And recordings should all be up on the YouTube site. If they're not, you have to ask Rabbi Kalman about that. That is not my responsibility. Okay. So first of all, where is this map from? Okay, so it's from a place called Madaba or Medba, we say in Hebrew, but in English it's always written Madaba. Okay, I brought you a nice little map here of Jordan. It is in the southwest-ish of Jordan, right? Just for context, up here is Amman. Okay, here's the Dead Sea. So we're a little bit further south than Jerusalem, right? If we wanted to take our latitude, longitude, right? Going across. And this is a town that had a Greek Orthodox, still has a Greek Orthodox community. It's not very far, by the way, from Mount Nebo. We're going to take a look um, at mosaics that come from a church over here, Khirbet and Mukhayet, which is Mount Nebo. Okay, so it's really a place that has a lot of biblical history, and therefore Christians are drawn to it. Okay, there was a Greek Orthodox community there in the late 19th century, and they wanted to build a church, the Church of St. George. And as they are preparing and building the church, they discover that they are building on top of a much, much older church, a Byzantine era church. And as they're starting to, they're noticing little glimpses of this mosaic, and tragically, preservation was not really very uppermost in their minds. And literally, they lay a concrete floor on parts of the mosaic. Okay. So this mosaic, which had been damaged, okay, had been damaged by fire and by moisture and by people, but a lot of it had survived up until the end of the 19th century, only to be destroyed by the creation of this church, which is very sad. In the 1960s, it takes till that people are starting to look at it, to discover it. An Israeli scholar named Michael Avi-Yonah writes a lengthy article about it in the 1950s without seeing it, right? Because in the 1950s, obviously Israelis can't legally go to Jordan, right? But he looks at scholarly publications and at drawings and at photographs, and he writes about it. In the 1960s, 1965, there's a German group, actually sponsored by Volkswagen, that sponsors its conservation, but the damage has been done, right? There are pieces that are just gone forever. Um, the map has more than 150 Greek inscriptions. The part that's surviving is 35 feet by 15 feet. It's got, and we'll see in some of the close-up pictures that I'll show you soon, it's got tons of colors. It's absolutely stunning. I mean, consider that this thing is 1,500 years old and the colors are still beautiful. And of course, the colors are all natural. They're coming from stones. Um, it is not proportional, as we saw before. Let's just take a look back for a minute, right? Jerusalem is clearly not as big as half of the Dead Sea, right? It's not proportional. And even in the cities, right? We'll see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is much bigger than it is supposed to be, right? So it's not proportional at all. Towns are depicted by walls and towers. We have the names of the tribes. We have buildings of churches and also of tombs. We have a lot of Tanakh. Okay, we're going to come back to that. But first, let's understand Medva or Madaba. Okay, it's in Tanakh. If you went to Shul last week and you were paying attention towards the end of the Parsha, right? Medva is mentioned towards the end of the Parsha because we're talking about Sichon and we're talking about Ammon and Moab, right? So Medva is down here in the tribe of Reuven, but before it becomes part of the tribe of Reuven, we have the battles with Ammon and Moab, right? And towards the end of Parshat Chukat, V'neram avad cheshbon, right? It's oilecha Moav, right? Your God Chemosh lost everything for you. V'neram avad cheshbon ad divon, v'nasim ad nofach, nashim ad nofach, asher ad medva. Yet we have cast them down utterly, cheshbon along with Dibon. We have wrought desolation at Nofach, which is near to Madaba. Okay, later on. we know that not later, not so much later, right? 2 weeks in the Parsha, the two and a half tribes, Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh, are going to come to Moshe and they're going to say, "We like this land. It's great. It's good for us. We have a lot of animals. We want to stay here," right? And then they have a whole agreement that they have to make with Moshe Rabbeinu. But in Sefer Yoshua, it tells us where these tribes are. Imo Reuven v'Hagadi lakchu nachlatam asher natan lahem Moshe be'ever hayarden mizracha. Okay, Reuven and Gad had received the share that Moses assigned them on the east side of the Jordan. May Aroer Asher al Spat Nachal Arnon. Again, Nachal Arnon we heard about in the parsha last week. Nachal Arnon is basically between Gad and Reuven. Va'ir Asher betoch hanachal v'chol hamishor medva ad Divon. Okay, so it's in the land of Reuven. Aver Hayarden, Transjordan, is sort of part of the land of Israel and sort of not throughout First Temple times and Second Temple times. We have the two and a half tribes. We also have Ammon and Moab and Aram and all kinds and Geshur and all kinds of other challenges. So it's really mixed up. In Second Temple times, there is an area called Perea in the southern part of Transjordan that is very Jewish. In fact, it's safer for Jews to travel there than through the Shomron. So Medva has a Jewish connection, has a Jewish history, not in the time period that we are talking about. Okay, a very important question that we want to ask is when was this map made, right? Because we want to be able to date it. We want to be able to understand the reality on the ground because as we're going to see, this map really reflects reality, okay? How do we date it? We don't have an inscription, right? Often we have an inscription that's amazing and it'll say it was made in the year of Emperor so-and-so, but we don't have that, okay? But what we do, we have lots of inscriptions, but we don't have an inscription that includes a date. But we have to look and see what we have on it and what we don't. So many of the things that we have on this map, as we're going to see in a little bit, are similar to what's written in a book by Eusebius, right? Remember Eusebius in the 4th century, okay? Bishop of Caesarea. He writes a very influential book called the Onomasticon, which is a geography of the land of Israel. And clearly the Medba map takes from that book. Okay. There are things that are very, very similar to what he writes about. Michael Aviona actually asks an interesting question. He says, maybe this map is based on an earlier map. We really don't know. It could be, but we don't know. So we know it has to be after the 4th century, after the Onomasticon. We've got other things that are here, okay? As we're going to see, there's a wall around the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is really what we use to date this map. It has to be after the wall is made, which is the time period of Eudokia of the 5th century. But the most important thing that we have here is what is marked here in red. And this is a nice big building, which is a church. Okay, we have a couple of churches, quite a few churches in Jerusalem. The most significant one is the Holy Sepulchre over here. Okay, but this is also a large church at the southern edge of the city. Okay, and this is called the Nea Church or the Church of the Theotokos. Okay, today almost none of it is left. It's in the area of the Jewish quarter, like right near Zion Gate, where there's a whole big playground area and open area. Very little of it remains. A lot of it was destroyed by the Persians in the 7th century, but it was a huge church. And we happen to know that this church was dedicated in the year 542. Okay, so if the church appears on the map, this has got to be sometime after 542. Now, there are other buildings here, other buildings that are not here, excuse me, that were built sometime at the end of the 6th century, the beginning of the 7th century. So we have a very nice window of sometime between 542 and we actually can narrow it down to 570 because there are buildings that are not here. Okay. This is a time period of one of the most powerful Roman emperors, somebody named Justinian in the 6th century. Very significant, not particularly wonderful to the Jews, but very important. A lot of conquest, a lot of building, massive Roman Empire, very, very wealthy. So it makes sense that this is the time period that we're talking about. Now, if we look back at the map, if we look at this Jerusalem one, but even better, if we look at the big one, right? The top is Jordan, okay? The bottom is Ashkelon and other cities on the coast, meaning just to remind you, okay, the top is east, the bottom is west. south is on the right and north is on the left, not our map, right? If this was a map that we would make today, we would flip it, right? We would turn it 90 degrees so that north was facing up. That is not what this map is. And the reason for that is because, sorry, I'm like making you all dizzy because I'm going the wrong direction. Sorry. Okay. The reason for that is that Tanakh and other ancient civilizations look towards the east. And that makes sense, right? Even today, when we are lost and we're in the car and we're looking at the map and we say, I really, well, or at Waze, right? I really need to orient myself, right? I need to find the east because the east is the easiest to find. We look at the sun. Even today, with all our sophistication and our maps and our apps and our everything else, you look to the sun and the sun tells you what direction you are in. Yes, people also look to the North Star. This is true. Not all maps are oriented towards the east, but in Eretz Israel and certainly in Tanakh, the east is the primary direction, right? And we have that. Take a look, right? We have the words. What is the Tanakh word for east? It is Mizrach, but it is also Kedem, right? Kedem, Kedma, the beginning, right? It's actually a very interesting word because you could talk about something that is kadum, that is ancient, but we also, when we want to go forward, we go kadima, right? So it can go both ways. We look backwards and forwards. But if you look at the Tanakh, right, we have already in Breshit, Vayazarcha ka'afar ha'aretz uparatzta yama, right? Yama over here. The Yam is the west. Vakedma to the east, Safona to the north, Negba to the south. Okay. We see it in other places even more interesting, right? In Zechariah, water's going to come out of Jerusalem. Chetziam el hayam hakadmoni. Half is going to go to the Yam Hakadmoni. I didn't bring you the translation because it's translated as the Eastern Sea, but that kind of defeats the purpose, right? The Kedem Yam, which is of course the Dead Sea, v'chetziam el hayam ha'acharon, not the last sea, but the sea that's in the back, right? The one that's behind you because you're facing east. So west is behind you, right? In the Nachalot, in the Machanot, in the desert. Vachonim Kedma Mizracha. Here we have both of them, right? Kedma is Mizracha, front or east. Okay. And the other corollary to this is if you are facing east, so Achora is west, behind you is west, and Yamina, your right hand, is south. Ale Rosha Pisca Vesainecha Yama Vitsafona Temana, right? Umizracha. Or think about Avraham and Lot, right? Avraham says to Lot, like, if you're going to go Yamin, I'm going to go small. If you're going to go small, I'm going to go Yamin. What does he mean, Yamin small? It's directions. And even today, right? Here are those of us in Israel, woken up at 5:15 by our non-friends, the Hutim. Where are they coming from? They're coming from Teiman. Where is Teiman? Teiman is in the south, right? Yamina, Teimana, it's the same thing. Okay, so that's our direction. So our orientation of the map, of the Medva map, is east is on the top. Okay, let's take a look at the style. What can we learn about the style of this map? It's a beautiful mosaic map made from thousands of colorful stones. Okay, now mosaics, we have mosaics. Mosaics are around for a long time. We have mosaics in Second Temple times. We have mosaics that go up to modern times. Okay, we have mosaics that are super simple, that are just like floors for wine presses. We have mosaics that don't have any imagery, but the time period of mosaics is the Byzantine time period. That's really when this art form develops to an incredible degree, and you just have these amazing things. And it's used by everybody. Jews, Christians, pagans, secular buildings, right? Buildings that have no religious significance. Everybody is doing mosaics. A lot of times they're copying from each other, which is interesting. So I just brought you 3 examples. Okay, this one is fantastic. I just discovered this one when I was researching this class. This is from that church that we said on Har Nevo. Okay, and it's this great, it's a church, but it's not a church scene, it's a hunting scene, right? There are the lions being chasing the gazelles and these guys with their tame zebras and ostriches, right? And it's fantastic. We have a shul, right? Lahavdil from the church. Over here on the right, we have the shul of Tzipori, which is all gorgeous mosaics, right? Zodiac and the seasons and all kinds of things like that. And on the top, we have this is earlier, this is from the fourth century. These two are a little bit later than that. We have a private home, or what we think is a private home, or at least not a religious place, in Lud. Was discovered about 20 years ago, also with fantastic mosaics of fish and animals and all kinds of stuff. So this is definitely the style, and this is why we have those mosaics today in the Cardo. It's meant to be an echo of that style that was just so popular that everybody did. Mosaics are also great, by the way, because they last longer than paint, usually. It depends on the situation, but usually. Okay, I keep going in the wrong direction. How do they know about the names and the places that are on this map? Because we're going to see this map is super detailed, right? Part of the reason that things are not always proportional is, think about when you're a kid or you're still me and you don't know how to make your birthday cards and fit everything in, right? They have to fit in a lot of text here in between all the pictures. So the pictures might be small because the text is really what's important. Where are they getting all this text? So we have this guy named Eusebius. Eusebius is an interesting fellow. He is, as far as we know, born in Caesarea. Okay, Caesarea, very important center of first of Rome in Eretz Israel, and then of Christianity in Eretz Israel, and a very important center of Christian learning. He's preceded by somebody named Origen, who's also very, very important Christian bishop who learns a lot and teaches a lot. Eusebius um, comes along and he is the Bishop of Caesarea. He writes a bunch of books. He writes a church history. He's a contemporary, interestingly enough, of Rabbi Abahu, right? One of our super important Eretz Israel Amoraim. And Rabbi Abahu, we know, was very well respected by the Romans. And we actually have a fascinating statement that he makes. He knows a lot of what's going on in the Christian world. He makes certain polemical statements, right? He talks about Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Hashem is one. I am one. I don't have a son. I don't have a father, right? He's very aware of Christianity. Um, and in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, he's having a conversation with a heretic. And this guy says to him, how come you, rabbis of the land of Israel, you know so much Tanakh and you can argue with us? He says, well, we have to know Tanakh because we live among you, you minim, right? You Christians who know the Bible, we have to argue with you. Okay, so does Rabbi Abau learn with Eusebius? Does Eusebius learn from Rabbi Abau? I don't know, but it's certainly not impossible. They're living in the same town, which is not such a big place. They're both significant in their communities. So Eusebius writes this book called the Onomasticon, and it's basically a geography of the land of Israel. Now, does he write it as a guidebook? No. He writes it as a way to understand Tanakh, but presumably it is used by travelers who come to the land of Israel, and it's used by map makers like the map makers of the Medva map. Okay. And what does he do? How is it organized? It's alphabetical. It's written in Greek, so Greek letters. Okay, it's alphabetical. And then within each alphabetical entry, he goes by the books of Tanakh, right? So he has, the letter Alpha. Where does it show up? In Breshit, in Shemot, in Vayikra, etc., etc. Okay. Mostly Tanakh and not New Testament, which is very interesting, and scholars have talked about it. I haven't seen any real good answer, but he focuses on Tanakh. At least some of the time, he must be speaking from firsthand experience. And he gives us distances. He actually says it's this X amount of Roman miles from the big city, right? It's a very, very useful thing for archaeologists, for scholars, for anybody today, but it was certainly useful then too. So I brought a few examples here, right? So he has Bet Sur, okay, in the tribe of Judah or Benjamin, right? Today this is Karmei Sur in Gush Etzion. There is now a village Bet Soro at the 20th milestone on the road going from Jerusalem to Hebron, or in other words, about 5 miles down the road from my house. Okay, this is a real place. He knew where it was. Sorek, right? Nachal Sorek, home of Balila, we know her as Delilah, the wife or the girlfriend of Shimshon, is today the valley called Sorek, north of Eleutheropolis. Eleutheropolis, Beit Guvrin, right? The valley, the area of Nachal Sorek is very close to Beit Guvrin, near Tzorah, the home of Samson, right? This all fits very well. This is not like even in the 18th, 19th century, pretend tour guides who would tell you all kinds of boom. I says he really knows his stuff. Okay. Shvela. Okay, the Shvela, the valley near Beit Shemesh, right? Or in Beit Shemesh, as is written in Isaiah. Aquila interprets plain, Symmachus Valley. Even now it is called Shvela. It is the region around Eleutheropolis to the north and the west, right? And here's a really good one, Luza. Jacob renamed this Beth El. This village, inhabited even now, is on the left of the road going to Jerusalem from Neapolis, and it's given to the tribe of Benjamin. So these are really invaluable, wonderful descriptions, and they help us today when we want to discover where these things are. And for sure, they are used by the makers of the map. Okay, now one of the things that we're going to say that we learned from this map, we don't know 100% why this map was made, but one, I think, a very strong suggestion is that it connects to a trend that we know was very popular in Byzantine Christian world, and that is pilgrimage. Okay, coming and walking in the footsteps, going to the places of the Bible, going to the places of the New Testament, and before you can have pilgrimage, you have to have places to visit, right? So one of the people who really makes Christian pilgrimage possible is the Empress Helena. Okay, and here she is looking very glamorous. I don't know if she really looked like that. Okay, the Empress Helena is Constantine. Remember, Constantine converts to Christianity. Constantine's mother. She is even more devout than her son. Towards the end of her life, she's an old woman already. She makes a trip to the land of Israel, and there aren't so many places to go to pilgrimage, right? This is in the fourth century. Okay, so she has all these Eusebius places, but there aren't any churches really yet. So she creates these pilgrimage places. She goes most famously to Jerusalem. She claims that she finds the true cross. She finds the place of the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus, and she creates a shrine, which eventually becomes the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. She goes to Beit Lechem and she finds the cave where Jesus is born. She creates the Church of the Nativity. She goes to Harazetim and she builds a church called the Eliona Church about Jesus when he ascends to heaven on Harazetim. Right, all of these things. Now, it's a very big question. Is she making it up? Are there traditions? She's coming not so long after the events took place. So it certainly makes sense, at least something as significant as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that there are traditions. But for our purposes, what's important is that she creates these places that pilgrims are going to come and visit in the next 100, 200, 300 years up until today. And pilgrimage becomes very, very popular. Don't be scared by all the writing. Um, we have one of the earliest accounts that we have of a Christian pilgrim coming to the land of Israel. It's actually very interesting. It's a woman. Her name is Egeria. She's coming maybe from Spain. We're not 100% sure. She's very, very chatty, which is great, right? She loves to talk. And she writes, you could see, first of all, in her writing, but also we're going to see how she's very chatty when she encounters people. She writes this book, as she says, for her sisters in faith. Does she belong to some kind of religious society at home? Who knows? But she's lucky enough to go on pilgrimage. And so she writes a book about it, right? This is her blog about her travel to Eretz Israel. And I brought you two different pieces here because they're both great. Okay. In the first one, first of all, we see her character a little bit, but we also see what does she do? She wants to come and she wants to go to the biblical sites. Okay. So here she's telling us she doesn't just go to Jerusalem, she goes all over the land of Israel and Jordan as well. Then going for a time through the valley of the Jordan on the bank of the river, because our route lay that way for a while, we suddenly saw the city of the holy prophet Elijah, that is Thespi, whence he had the name of Eliyahu the Tishbi, right? We have our Mefarshim all talk about what does that mean? What does that mean, Tishbe? And if I'm remembering correctly, Rashi says it's a place called Thespon or Thespa. There to this day is the cave where the holy man sat. Their tomb is the tomb of the holy Geta or Yiftach, whose name, well, again, Pop Torah last week, whose name we read in the book of the Judges. And in that valley, we saw the cell of one who is now a brother that is a monk. Then I, as I am very inquisitive, began to ask what was this valley where the holy monk had now made himself a cell, for I did not think it was without reason, right? And here's this poor monk, he's trying to get away from it all. And here's this Yachna, she's coming and she's bothering him. Why are you here? The holy men who were journeying with us, who knew the place, said, "This is the valley of Korah, Crete, where holy Elijah the Tishbe dwelt in the time of King Ahab, when there was a famine. At the bidding of God, the raven used to bring him food. For this brook which you see running through this valley into Jordan is Crete. Wherefore, giving thanks to God, who deigned to show us everything that we desired, unworthy as we were, we begged to make our journey as on other days." Right? Fascinating. She wants to know all these places. She wants to be part of this story. And this is something which, by the way, still exists today, this idea of experiential travel. And by the way, Christians are much better at it than Jews. Right? They want to experience, they want to walk in the footsteps. Now, the second passage that I brought here is when she's in Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, it's a little bit different because here she reflects for us the pageantry and the ritual of what the pilgrims would do, particularly on Christian holy days. Okay. And bear with me, it's a little long, but it is very interesting. And at the first cock crow, they come down from the Imbomon, that's a church on Har Hazeitim, with hymns and arrive at the place where the Lord prayed. In that place is a graceful church. The bishop and all the people enter. A prayer to the suitable to the place and the day is said. The passage from the gospel is read. And then all, even to the smallest child, go down with the bishop on foot with hymns to Gethsemane. Okay, they start on top of Har Hazeitim. They go all the way down to Gat Shmanim, which is at the foot of Har Hazeitim, where on account of the great number of people in the crowd who are wearied owing to the vigils and weak through the daily fast, right? This is happening during Lent, at the end of Lent, because they have so great a hill to descend. They come very slowly with hymns to Gethsemane, and over 200 church candles are made ready to give light to all the people. And then there's another prayer and a hymn and a passage, etc., etc. There is so great a moaning and groaning of all the people together with weeping that their lamentation may be heard perhaps as far as the city, right? They're really getting into it. They're living it. From that hour, they go with hymns to the city on foot, reaching the gate about the time when one man begins to be able to recognize another, right? This is all happening before daybreak, right on through the midst of the city, where all to a man there, for on that special day, not a soul withdraws from the vigils until morning. Thus, the bishop is escorted from Gethsemane to the gate and through the whole of the city to the cross, right? To the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And when they arrive before the cross, the daylight is growing bright. Okay, this clearly made a huge impression on her. It's happening all together. It's happening in the darkness. There are special things that are said, right? It's very powerful, and it gives you a sense also of this city, which, as we're going to see towards the end of this class, is a very, very Christian city. There are churches everywhere. There are Christians everywhere. There's pageantry everywhere, and there are no Jews, right? There are no Jews at all. And this is also something that Christians today, devout Christians today, come to Jerusalem, Holy Week. They travel on the Via Dolorosa. They carry the cross. They wear the crown of thorns. It's very, very experiential. However, in the time of Egeria, the walking is much more, right? Today, you go maybe from the middle of the Via Dolorosa to Church of Holy Sepulchre, you could walk it quickly in 15 minutes. These guys go from the top of Har Hazeitim down in through the Lion's Gate, all the way to the Holy Sepulchre, sometimes to Mount Zion. They're logging, they're getting in their steps. Now, how does this traveling work, right? First of all, there's the Roman road system, which is still in place. I stole this from someone on the internet, Sasha Trubetsky. It's fantastic. I love it. It's a subway map of the Roman road system. If you want to see it, you can Google subway map Roman road system. You can see it up close. It's just fun to see the main roads. But obviously, this is made possible because there are all these great roads, right, that are coming from all parts of the empire. And because the empire is one empire and is relatively at peace, and people can travel. right? This is the Pax Romana still. People can travel and go from place to place. So that's one thing that facilitates this travel. The other thing is, okay, you got here, where are you going to stay? Um, for sure, people camped out, right? Roughed it. But one of the things that facilitates the travel is that by the time we get to the fourth, fifth, sixth century, you have a lot of monasteries in the land of Israel, particularly in the Judean desert. Okay, this is a picture of the ruins of a very large monastery near Ma'ale Adumim called the Euthemius or the Avtimus Monastery. Um, and the monks were very glad to host the pilgrims, and the pilgrims were very glad to be hosted by the monks, right? It works both ways. They get lodging, they get advice on where to go, they get a secure place to stay away from bandits, and in return, when they leave, they tend to leave a nice donation. So this is a very good symbiotic relationship, and it makes it possible for people to travel. However, despite all this, right, despite the excitement and the desire, it's really a religious desire to come, and the monks are facilitating it, et cetera, there are church fathers who don't like it. They really don't like it, right? And I brought you this picture of the Holy Sepulchre at, I don't know if this is Easter, but it's certainly a time that is very popular. It's very crowded. And there are church fathers who speak out against this. They don't like this, right? Think about any mass kind of a pilgrimage. I guess what comes to mind, and if I have any breast lovers here, you'll forgive me, is the trip to Uman, right? Where for all the spirituality that you might get out of this trip, there's a lot of other stuff that's going on because you've got tons of people who are traveling, who are kind of letting loose from the strictures of home. Maybe it's, only young men and stuff is happening that maybe shouldn't be happening on a religious pilgrimage. So that's on a very, very basic practical level. On a more theological level, the church fathers don't like it because they say, no, 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 that Judaism, the outmoded faith, the old Israel, they were very tied to physical places. They have this idea of Aliyah Regel and pilgrimage and the earthly Jerusalem. But we are the heavenly Jerusalem, and our pilgrimage needs to be interior, and our pilgrimage needs to be, a journey to Jesus. And think about, Pilgrim's Progress many hundreds of years later, right? It's an internal journey. It's a spiritual journey. It doesn't need to be a physical journey. Does that mean that people didn't come? Of course not. Okay, but there were objections that were voiced to this. It wasn't always so popular. Another group who doesn't like it so much are, we just said the monks do like it, but there are monks who don't like it, right? One of the ideas of becoming a monk is to get away from it all, is to go away into the desert, is to serve God in isolation, in asceticism. This is one of these very isolated monasteries in Wadi Kelt in Nahal Prat, like hanging off the edge of a cliff. They don't want these masses showing up. They want to be able to serve God. They're kind of anti-establishment, and this is very much establishment, right? They don't like this. So not everybody loves this idea, but pilgrimage is definitely a phenomenon of the Byzantine period, and the Medva map is a great example of a way that you can think about and plan your trip, right? Because you see it all laid out in front of you, right? There's no TripAdvisor, there's no Google Maps. How do you think about a trip? If you see it there laid out on the floor in front of you in church, that's a great way for you to figure out where you want to go, what you want to see. And also, not everybody can go on a pilgrimage, right? A pilgrimage takes money, it takes time, it's not so simple, but everybody can go to church in this town and see what's on the floor and kind of picture it and imagine it and hope that maybe one day they could go. So pilgrimage, very much a part of this story. Okay. Let's pivot a little to something else that we can learn from this map. Okay, and this is something that's been discussed a lot. I'm not going to do too much on it. We've talked about it in this class, but I want to do a little bit. The largest part of this map is Hagia Polis Hierosolima, right? That's what it says up here in Greek, the holy city of Jerusalem. It is very large, outsized, as we said. And there are certain things that we can learn about the city from it. So I took the map of the Byzantine city from the Carta maps here, but I flipped it, right? Usually you see it with the north up. I made it with the east up, right? So that we can correspond a couple of things that we can see here. So we've got, Okay, go away. We've got our wall around the city, right? We've got our nice wall that we're going to be talking about. We've got our wall here around the city. And just like this wall goes all the way down to the city of David and includes Har Zion and includes that area, same thing here, right? It goes all the way down. We've got gates. All right, we've got the area of Shar Shechem, the Damascus Gate. They're not called by these names, but they're in the same places. The area of the Lion's Gate, the area of Jaffa Gate, right? We've got all these various gates. We've got a lot of towers. We've got buildings. We've got churches. Okay. We've got the Holy Sepulchre, which is over here. Okay. We've got the Nea Church, which we already mentioned, which is over here. Okay. We've got that what we talked about last time, the Amud, the pillar inside of Shar Shechem. Okay. And very interesting. Oh, well, we're going to talk about the Cardos, right? Two of them, two north-south streets. Okay. Again, see them over here. All this marking up is not going to help you see anything. And we've got an area that is empty, and it's empty over here too. Okay. And that's the area of the Temple Mount. Okay, so now that we have kind of a bigger picture, or at least a mess, oh, one last thing. Okay, this map shows us that there are many churches on Har HaZeitim, and we know that. We know it from archaeology. There are no churches on Har HaZeitim here. Why? Because the cement floor was poured over the area of Har HaZeitim. Okay, so we don't know what was there. Presumably, the churches were there. They were definitely around in the Byzantine period. They were very important. So presumably they were there, but they are not anymore in our map, sadly. So we will never be able to see them. Okay, so we're going to refer back to some things that we see here, but I just wanted you to kind of get the big picture as I erase everything. There's be a way to erase everything at once. I just don't know how to do it. Okay, here we go. Almost done. Okay. Um, so first the walls. Okay. So we said we have this empress, Eudokia. She's very interesting. She's married to an emperor named Theodosius. She has like a rags to riches story. She has no money, but she's very beautiful. She marries the emperor. At some point, she falls out of favor and she kind of self-exiles to Jerusalem and she lives out her days in Jerusalem from 443 to 460, but she still has power. And she does things. First of all, she's not as anti-Jewish. Some people suggest that she allows Jews back into Jerusalem in the time that she's here. But she also does something very significant that no one had done since the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70. She rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem. And those walls stand from the 5th century till there's an earthquake in 1033. So that's a pretty significant thing. She rebuilds the walls. We have pieces of those walls. Okay. This is one of the pieces at the bottom of Mount Zion. We have other pieces near the Ophel. We have pieces near Migdal David. Why does she do this? So there's like a midrashic suggestion that she believes she is destined to do this because she learns the verse in Tehillim, Hitiva birtzoncha et Zion, tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, right? Hashem, it should please you to make Zion prosper, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Eudokia in Greek means the one who makes good or the one who pleases, Hetiva. So she reads this and she says, this is my destiny to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And she does. And so we saw those walls are around on our Medba map. Okay. We also have churches. Okay. Church that is, of course, the most important church. And we saw it's disproportionately big, right? Always looks like a giant came along and flattened it, but it's very important. It's placed in the center right off of the Cardo, even though in reality, not so much, right? It's a little bit further away. It's not so central, but theologically, it has to be central. Church of Holy Sepulchre, as we mentioned before, the Empress Helena, the place where the crucifixion happens, the burial happens, right? Jesus' body disappears. Very, very important for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. And of course, still very, very significant today. On the other hand, the Nea Church Okay? We have other churches, but those are the two major ones. Super important in Byzantine times, enormous, but it really is only around for about 100 years. It's almost completely destroyed by the Persians in the early 7th century. When the excavations are done in the Jewish quarter in the 20th century, and there are those who argue, who say that they should have emphasized this, there really isn't much that you can see from the Nan Church. And the Jewish Quarter Development Company said, we don't have a lot of open space in the Jewish Quarter, and we're going to use this area to make a playground and amphitheater. And so you really can't see very much at all. Something that you can see very well is, first of all, the Western Cardo. This is one of the big discoveries of Nachman Avigad after the Six-Day War when he starts to excavate the Jewish quarter. It's the one thing that he knows he's going to find. The Medba mapper is already well known. He sees it very, very clearly on the map, and he excavates it and he finds it. Something that wasn't found until much more recently is the Eastern Cardo, right? Remember, we had the two. We have the one that goes down the center of the city, and then we have the one that goes also coming from the area of Shar Shem, but going much closer to the area of the Kotel. And that was discovered like 10, 15 years ago when the excavations were done at the back of the Kotel Plaza. Okay. Um, these two streets are very, very important. As we talked about last time, that this really makes like the skeleton, the bones of the city. We won't go into that now, but it's definitely a significant part of Jerusalem. Okay, moving away from Jerusalem, we have a lot of other interesting details in the map. We have flora and we have fauna, not so much, but some. Okay. Unfortunately, besides the destruction from the cement floor, we have an earlier destruction. There were the Byzantines who made this map, didn't bother them to put in animals and even people. But there was a movement called iconoclasm, which didn't like imagery. Okay? And somebody came along at some point and said, we don't want to have a lion, so we're going to erase its face. Okay. Or we don't want to have, even worse, people. So we're going to cut them out. But they're here, right? We see their legs. We know they were here. Now, whether somebody stopped them or they didn't care as much about the fish and the gazelles, we still have other animals here. We have one of the really nice elements is the fish swimming in the Jordan River. Okay. But we also have some plants. Okay. And right near the Jordan River on both sides, we have this very nice plant, which we think is balsam, a farsamon. Okay. The balsam plant was a very, very well known plant in ancient times. It was used to make perfume. We hear about it in our sources. Okay. And we know that it's down near En Gedi from our sources, right? The Gemara and Shabbos says, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left the poorest of the land to be kormim and yogvim. This is from Sefer Malachim, vine dressers and husbandmen. Kormim, Rabbi Yosef learned, this means balsam gatherers from En Gedi to Ramah, okay, because En Gedi is where the balsam grows. And we know we have a synagogue inscription from Byzantine times, from the synagogue in En Gedi, where Jews were living, and it seems that it's referring to the balsam production, which had like a secret, right? There was an industrial trade secret. Anyone who causes strife among his fellow men or informs on them to non-Jews or steals his friend's possessions or tells the secret of the city to non-Jews, he whose eyes roam the whole land and see everything hidden will smite that man and his children, right? Secret of the city, how you make the balsam, because that was what was there. So we see it here on the map. They don't write anything about it, but it's here. It's one of the illustrations. Okay. Another fascinating thing, and here's where we get to see some of all that writing, so much writing. Okay. The map, as we said, is influenced by Eusebius. Eusebius, it seems, is influenced by Chazal. Okay. And if you look at the map, and for that, it helps to see not just the map, the close-up of the map, but this is Michael Yaviona wrote the an English translation, not an English translation, sorry, a Hebrew translation of the Greek. And if you look carefully, you will see that he writes Eval and Grizim, okay, very close to the Jordan River. And then he writes Tur Eval, the mountain of Eval, and Tur Grizim, the mountain of Grizim. There's two Grizim, there's two Eval. What's going on? Right? And this one is very close to Neapolis, which is a town that we call Shechem. So what's happening here? Okay. So the Torah tells us that when you come into the land, you're going to give the blessings on Grizim and the curse on Harival. Very nice. It's on the other side of the Jordan, behind the western road. This is the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the Arava and the Gilgal, right? It seems to be very contradictory directions. The Gemara, both the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, are trying to figure out where are these places and how close could they be to the Yarden that you could do this blessing and curse on the day that you come into the land. Okay. And Rabbi Elazar says there were two mounds called Grizim and Ebal. In the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, they walked 120 mil on that day, meaning Rabbi Yehuda says they're near Shechem, like the Shomronim say. But in the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, they did not move at all. There are two, it's called, the Gemara says, Gav Shushim, little hills called Grizim and Ebal right near the Yarden. Comes along Eusebius, and what does he say? Geval or Eval, mountain in the promised land where Moses commanded an altar to be built. They say there are two neighboring mountains facing each other located near Jericho, one Grizim and one Eval. The Samaritans erroneously point out two others near Neapolis, since the great distance of one from the other there shows they are not able to hear one another when calling out from one. So the Samaritans say it's this, but it's wrong. It's later we know that actually it's not wrong, but fine. What do the people of the map do? They hear that Eusebius says both of these. They don't pay attention to the fact that he doesn't like this one, and they put in both. They put in both of them on the map, which is great, right? It's fantastic. They put in both. Let's make sure we have all opinions. Grizim, Eval in both places. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more things. Let's see, crossing the Jordan, right? So I brought you this picture before, but I'm going to bring you again. We have a great Gemara about Rabbi Zera. When he comes to Eretz Yisrael, he's having a hard time. His Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't want him to come. He comes. When he gets to Eretz Yisrael, he could not find a ferry to cross the Jordan River. He took hold of a rope that was strung across as a makeshift bridge. Okay, and the Gemara calls it a metzra. Okay, and he crosses, and Rashi says, "What's a metzra?" He says there's a rope strung across the river with two poles, one on each side, and a person holds on and crosses the river. Okay, that's Rashi in the 11th century. And if you look at the Medva map, you have this Metzra right here. Here it is, right? There is a ferry attached, but it's crossing from one side to the other with this beam that is going across from one side to the other. Okay, so that's Rabbi Zera. Okay, I think because we are running out of time, we're just going to we'll skip this. Maybe we'll come back to it. But two things that the map does not show. Okay, one of them we said, and I wouldn't really show it, but we know about Byzantine Jerusalem, Jerusalem of the Medva map. There are no Jews. Okay, this is a mural, contemporary mural that is today in the Cardo. There are no Jews. This mural actually does have Jews. It does have Teddy Kollek and Nachman Avigad and Hillel Geva, who are the mayor and the excavators, respectively. But really, in Jerusalem of the 6th century, we have no Jews. We have this terrible, nasty commentary from the church father Jerome. Until today, it has been forbidden for those poisonous hypocrites to enter Jerusalem because of the murder of the prophets. They may come only to cry on the day that the Romans conquered and destroyed Jerusalem, right? Tisha B'Av. You could see the members of this nation, women wearing rags and men carrying a burden of rags and years, gathering to mourn, improving by their bodies and their clothes the meaning of the anger of the Lord. A collection of miserable rabble appears while the cross of the Lord shines and celebrates its resurrection, and on the Mount of Olives is raised a cross. Meanwhile, this pathetic nation cries over its destroyed temple, and they are not worthy of pity. Okay, so as much as Byzantine Jerusalem may have been beautiful and shining and gorgeous for us, it's a very terrible story. But the other thing that the map doesn't show, and this is a little bit hinted at by Jerome, okay, is that there's nothing on Har Habayit. This is a schematic drawing by Michael Aviona of the map. And this area is, number 32, is empty. And this area stays empty until the Muslim ruler Omar comes along. And we have this source, which we have in Jewish sources and in Muslim sources, okay, how when Omar comes to the city, he allows the Jews back in and he comes with them to clean up the site of the Temple Mount. All the Muslims in the city and surrounding came together with a group of Jews. They were ordered to sweep the site of the temple and to clean it. Omar was in charge of their work. Whenever they uncovered another layer, he would ask the elders of the Jews if this was the stone known as the foundation stone. So the Jews return with the Muslims. Beit HaMikdash, at least the area of Har Habayit, regains respect with the Muslims. And history, as always, is ironic. Okay, so let's see what comments people have. Okay, Constantine, we said, was a pagan. He was a good Roman pagan. And then you can read about Constantine. He has this vision when he's going into battle that he sees the letters of the word Christ, and this is what should come before you in battle. Okay. The Medva, okay, so we answered that. Why is it lying on its side? We talked about the orientation. Avram ran after Lot Asher mismol lidamesek. Nice, north of Damascus, right? And small Bamina, right? We said that. Okay. Talks tour advertisement from ancient times. Okay, Rabbi Zera's zip line across the Jordan. Exactly, it is a zip line. That's it. Thank you. Anybody else have comments, have questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
just a comment.
Yes, please, Susanna.
My voice teacher told me that there's some indigenous people somewhere that doesn't have a concept of right and left. Like right hand, their hands are like they're just their hands. They don't have like right hand.
How do they do directions?
They talk about north, south, east, and west, and they just always know where that is.
That's it. So they're always like orienting by the sun or the stars or whatever.
Right.
But not right and left. That would work for me because I always get confused. So that's very interesting. I would be curious who they are.
I don't know. I mean, she wasn't more specific than that, and I don't know where they are in the world.
That's very cool. All right, I see somebody wrote there's a nice reconstruction of the map. Yeah, there are lots of them. The Tower of David actually did a really nice thing because they have a whole interactive thing in the new museum. But there's also in the Cardo, there's lots of places where you can see the Jerusalem part of the map. So if you're interested, go and check it out. Okay, thank you everybody. The recording I hope is going to be up from last time. I will check in with the office and from this time as well, Be'ezrat Hashem. Shabbat Shalom, Bisorot Tovot, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Shulie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie.
So much fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shulie.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank